I remember the day like it was yesterday, but at the same time, it feels like a lifetime ago. It was a Tuesday, an ordinary Tuesday. The kind of day that starts with coffee, ends with dinner, and in between, you get caught up in the rush of life. I had no reason to expect that it would be any different from any other day. But that evening, something changed. Something so simple, so quiet, that it barely made a sound. I had come home from work a little earlier than usual. I hadn't planned on it. It just happened. I walked through the front door, dropped my keys on the counter, and noticed the envelope on the kitchen table. It was a plain white envelope, nothing fancy, nothing that would have caught my attention on any other day. But it wasn't the envelope itself that stood out. It was the name on it, for your eyes only. It wasn't signed. It wasn't addressed with any flair, no added touch that would make it feel personal. Just that, written in small, neat handwriting. I felt a chill. A small, inexplicable chill. I wasn't sure why, but something about that envelope felt off. The words on it were so casual, but I could sense something in them. I stood there for a moment, just staring at it. My hand hovered over the envelope as if waiting for a signal. My mind was already racing through possibilities, work-related, a letter from one of our children's schools. But nothing seemed to fit. Finally, I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in half. I pulled it out, unfolded it carefully, and began to read. I know what you're going to say. I know how you're going to feel. But I need to tell you the truth before it's too late. These last few months, I've been hiding something. A secret. It's not something I'm proud of. And I wish I could take it back, but I can't. It's out there now. The words burned into my brain. I paused after reading them, my mind going blank. I had no idea what to expect, but it wasn't this. The letter went on. I've been seeing someone else, and I've been lying about it for months. This isn't a mistake I can undo, but I want to give you the chance to decide what happens next. I will be here when you come home. Please don't hate me. Just understand. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It was something worse, an acknowledgement of guilt, wrapped in the coldness of reality. The room seemed to close in on me. The kitchen felt smaller. The silence pressed against my ears. I could feel my heart pounding, a deep, heavy thump in my chest, each beat echoing in the quiet of the house. I set the letter down on the table, my hands trembling. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. This was my life. I'd built everything around this life. We had built everything together. 30 years of marriage. 30 years of raising children, buying houses, forging a future. And now this silent, anonymous letter, with its cold, cutting words. I stood there, frozen. Time seemed to stand still as I processed what I had just read. My mind was racing, but it felt like I was stuck in place. The world outside, the one I had trusted, the one I had built, felt like it was slipping through my fingers. And then, as if on cue, I heard the sound of the door opening. Carol, my wife, stepped inside. She took off her shoes, hung up her coat, and looked at me. Her eyes briefly flicked toward the letter, and for a split second, something in her expression changed. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. She smiled at me, her usual smile. But there was something in her eyes, a hidden depth, a shadow that lingered. "Hey," she said, her voice light, casual. "How was your day?" The question was so normal, so ordinary, that for a second, I wondered if this had all been some sick dream. Maybe I had imagined the letter. Maybe it was some kind of cruel joke. But I knew better. I knew the truth was already staring me in the face. I couldn't speak. The words wouldn't come. What could I say? What do you say when your whole world is crumbling around you, and the person you trusted most in the world is standing there, pretending like nothing is wrong? She stepped closer, still unaware of the storm that was brewing inside me. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice sweet, as if she hadn't just shattered my reality. I took a breath, my mind working overtime to catch up with the situation. But no matter how hard I tried, the words wouldn't form. All I could manage was a whisper. "Is it true?" The question hung in the air, suspended between us like a weight. For a moment, she didn't move. Her face went pale, and I could see the subtle change in her eyes. She was no longer the woman I had spent my life with. In that instant, she was a stranger, standing there with her hands clasped, her face a mask. Finally, she spoke. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you." And that was it. The floodgates had opened. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was the beginning of something that I couldn't possibly comprehend. Something that would change everything. And what came next would leave me breathless. I don't think I could have prepared for what came next, no matter how much time I had. My mind was still trapped in a fog of confusion, disbelief, and anger as Carol stood in front of me. She didn't seem to be in a rush, her eyes shifting nervously, like she was waiting for me to react, to do something, anything. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed. Her words hung in the air like a thick cloud, suffocating me. She said it so simply, as if admitting the most gut-wrenching truth was something you could just say and move on. I didn't know how to tell you. But there it was. The truth. The cold, unforgiving truth. And somehow, I could tell she wasn't even sorry for herself. She was sorry for the aftermath. Sorry for how I might react. Sorry for the mess that was about to unfold. I stood there for a moment, unable to process what had just happened. 30 years of marriage, and in a single moment, it felt like everything was on the verge of crumbling. I felt my heart start to race, the blood pumping harder in my chest. My hands clenched into fists by my sides. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Anger? Betrayal? Sadness? Maybe all of them, mixed together in a cocktail that was as volatile as it was overwhelming. But the thing that really stung the most? The thing that tore me up inside? It wasn't the fact that she had cheated. It was that she had hidden it for so long. She had spent months lying to me. Months of sharing a bed, sharing meals, pretending everything was fine, while she carried this secret around like it was nothing. Greg, my best friend, the man I had trusted more than anyone else, the person I had laughed with, cried with, confided in. And now, he was the one who had crossed that line with her. The man who had been like a brother to me. A brother who had stabbed me in the back. My stomach turned at the thought of them together. The images were unbearable, so vivid in my mind that I could almost see them in front of me. Him, her, laughing, touching, sharing something that was never meant for me. Carol must have seen the horror in my face because she quickly stepped forward, her hands outstretched like she wanted to reach me, to touch me. But I pulled back, instinctively, as if her touch would burn me. Mike, please. I never meant for this to happen. How long? My voice cracked as the question escaped before I could stop it. It was the one thing I needed to know, the one thing I had to hear. I needed a timeline. I needed to understand just how deep this wound really was. She hesitated, a brief flicker of guilt crossing her face. I could see she was fighting with herself, trying to decide just how much she wanted to admit. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. A year, she whispered. A year. I couldn't breathe. A year? How had I missed it? A full year of betrayal, hidden behind closed doors, masked by smiles and daily routines. A year of lies. A year of empty words. A year of what? I asked, barely able to form the words. Her gaze dropped, unable to meet mine. She looked at the floor, like it was the only thing she could focus on. I don't know, Mike. I don't have an excuse. I don't even know how it started, but I couldn't stop it. You couldn't stop it? I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. So, you're telling me this just happened? You just woke up one day and thought, I'll cheat on my husband with my best friend, and that was it? She flinched, as though my words had struck her. Her face twisted with pain, but I couldn't bring myself to care. She had broken something in me that couldn't be fixed with apologies. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. But it happened. I made a choice, and now I'm living with the consequences. The consequences. That's what she thought this was. A mistake, a bad choice. But it wasn't just a choice. It was a destruction of trust. A tearing apart of everything I had believed in for nearly 3 decades. Do you love him? I asked suddenly. It was a question that had been gnawing at the back of my mind. I had to know. Her face faltered for a second before she finally nodded, almost imperceptibly. I care about him, Mike. I do. But I don't love him the way I love you. The words stung even more. She cared about him. She didn't love him, but she cared. That was the truth, wasn't it? She had let herself fall into a situation where she was emotionally invested. She had crossed a line. She had given herself to someone else. And now, she was standing there, telling me she still cared about him, still had feelings for him, but it was all okay because she loved me more. That's when it hit me. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about something else entirely. Something I couldn't even begin to comprehend. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was a craving for excitement. Maybe it was something deep inside her that she had never dealt with. But whatever it was, I was no longer part of it. I was the one who had been cast aside, the one who had been living in a false reality. How long has this been going on? I asked again, my voice barely above a whisper. I needed to know the full extent. How much had she lied? How many times had I been blind? Since last summer, she admitted quietly. Right after the company retreat. That's when it started. I swallowed hard. Last summer. That was almost 6 months ago. And it had been going on for months before she confessed. The thought of her with Greg, laughing, spending time together, living a double life while I remained completely unaware, it was more than I could handle. I turned away from her, unable to look at her anymore. I had to leave. I had to get out of that house, away from her, away from the lies. But she reached for me, her voice desperate. Mike, please. Don't leave. Don't walk away from me. I don't know who you are anymore. I muttered under my breath, the tears starting to sting at the corners of my eyes. I can't be here. Not like this. And with that, I walked out. As I stepped into the cold night air, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Greg. We need to talk. Soon. And for the first time in my life, I knew I was about to face the hardest conversation of all. I don't know what I was expecting when I stepped out that door. Maybe I was hoping for clarity. Maybe I was running from the chaos that had suddenly erupted in my life. But as I walked down the street, the cold air biting at my face, I couldn't escape the overwhelming feeling of disbelief. My chest felt hollow, like a void had opened up inside me, swallowing everything I thought I knew. It had been Greg. It wasn't some random guy. It wasn't just some mistake. It was my best friend. The one man I trusted more than anyone else. The one who knew me better than anyone else. The man I had shared my darkest secrets with, and now, he was the one who had torn my life apart. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How had this happened? How had it gone from simple, innocent conversations to something more? Had I missed the signs? How had they pulled this off right under my nose? I remember the first time I met Greg. We were in college. He was the guy everyone gravitated towards. Confident, funny, the life of the party. We hit it off right away. We were practically inseparable. We both had the same sense of humor, the same taste in music, and the same rebellious streak. We did everything together. He was more than just a friend. He was a brother. The kind of friend who would drop everything for you when you needed him. That's what I thought. And now? Now I couldn't even look at him without feeling like I had been lied to for years. My stomach twisted at the thought of him, the same man who had stood beside me during the highs and lows of my life, now betraying me in the most unimaginable way. I pulled out my phone and stared at the text message from Greg. We need to talk. Soon. I could feel the knot tightening in my stomach. How was I supposed to even begin a conversation with him? How could I look him in the eye and pretend like everything was okay? How could he think we could have a normal conversation after everything he had done? But, despite all the questions racing through my mind, I knew one thing for certain. I had to see him. I had to hear his side. I needed to know how deep this went. I dialed his number, my fingers shaking slightly as I pressed the buttons. It rang twice before he picked up. Mike? You okay? His voice was calm, too calm, like he wasn't aware of the storm he had just unleashed. Where are you? I asked, my voice sharp. I'm at the office, man. You want to meet up? We need to talk, Mike, Greg replied, his tone edging toward uncertainty. I didn't say anything for a moment. I didn't know what I was waiting for. An apology? An explanation? But nothing came. Just silence between us, the weight of everything hanging in the air. I'll be there in 10 minutes, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt heavy, like they didn't belong to me anymore. When I arrived at his office, I stood outside for a moment, looking up at the glass building, its stark, cold exterior matching the way I felt inside. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe I thought I would be able to talk to Greg and everything would magically make sense. Maybe I was still holding onto the naive belief that this could somehow be fixed. But deep down, I knew that nothing would be the same. I walked inside, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind consumed by the picture of Carol and Greg together. I could see them now, sitting across from each other at some dark corner of a bar, exchanging secret glances, sharing moments that I had been too blind to notice. Had I ever seen them together, really seen them? Greg was sitting at his desk when I walked in. He looked up, his eyes briefly flicking to the door before quickly glancing away. His posture was stiff, like he was preparing for something. But what? Was he going to apologize? Beg for forgiveness? Mike, sit down, he said, his voice almost a whisper. I stood there for a moment, just staring at him. There was so much anger inside me, so much betrayal that I didn't know if I could stay calm. I didn't want to hear whatever explanation he had prepared. I didn't want him to try and justify what he had done. But I had to hear it. I had to know the truth. I sat down across from him, my hands tightly gripping the edge of the chair. Look, man, I never meant for this to happen. Greg started, his words coming out rushed, like he was trying to find the right way to soften the blow. But no words could soften this. Not now. Not ever. You never meant for this to happen? I repeated, my voice rising. Is that really what you're going with? You never meant for it? You've been lying to me for months, and now you're telling me it wasn't intentional? Greg winced, clearly not prepared for the full force of my anger. Mike, I don't know what to say. It just happened, all right? It wasn't supposed to, but it did. It wasn't supposed to. My voice cracked as I leaned in closer. You think that's an excuse? That you just slipped up? You're telling me this happened, and you just couldn't control yourself? Greg's face flushed with guilt, but his eyes avoided mine. He looked anywhere but at me, like he was searching for a way out. I know, man. I know it was wrong, but I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted to do that. But you did, I whispered, the words sinking deep into the silence between us. And that was it. That was all he had to say. No apology, no real understanding of what he had done. Just empty words, words that meant nothing. I want you to look me in the eye, Greg, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I want you to tell me the truth. Did you ever love her? Did you want her like I did? He looked at me then, really looked at me. But all I saw in his eyes was shame. No, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't want to hurt you. But yes, I did care about her. I did. The truth was out there now. The full weight of the betrayal hung between us, and there was no going back from it. But as I sat there, staring at the man who had once been my best friend, I realized something. This wasn't just about Carol. It wasn't just about what had happened between them. This was about me. About how I had let myself become complacent, how I had ignored the signs and believed everything was fine. And now? Now I had to find a way to pick up the pieces of the life that had been ripped apart. It wasn't just Carol and Greg who had betrayed me. It was me too. And the hardest part was yet to come. I didn't know how long I sat there, staring at Greg. The world outside the office seemed so far away, so distant, like I was trapped in some sort of suffocating bubble, and it was only us, the three of us, left inside. He looked down at his hands, then back at me, as though he was waiting for something. An invitation to explain himself, maybe. But no explanation could ever be enough. We were both stuck in the same room, in the same moment, with the same painful truth hanging in the air. The silence between us was unbearable, like a pressure I couldn't escape. I don't think I can ever look at you the same way, I finally whispered, my voice thick with emotion. You've crossed a line, Greg, and I don't know how I can ever get past that. He winced at my words, but he didn't argue. He knew it was true. He knew that what he had done wasn't something you could easily fix with a few apologies or half-hearted explanations. It wasn't just a betrayal of friendship. It was a betrayal of trust, of everything I thought I knew about myself, about us, about the life we'd built. I never wanted it to end like this, he said quietly, looking almost defeated. But that wasn't enough for me. It wasn't enough to just admit that things had gone too far. What about the consequences? What about the devastation it had caused? I stood up abruptly, walking to the window. I needed space. I needed to breathe. But every time I tried to escape the chaos inside me, I couldn't. My mind wouldn't stop replaying the same scenes over and over again. Carol, Greg, their secret world that I hadn't been a part of. I turned back to face him, my heart pounding harder with every step. Do you realize what you've done? Do you understand the gravity of this? Greg stood up then, too, running a hand through his hair. His posture was small, like he was trying to make himself less of a target. Mike, I've never wanted to hurt you. You know that. I thought I could keep this from you. I thought I could fix it without it ever coming to this. Fix it? How could you fix something that was broken beyond repair? I didn't know how to respond to that. How could I possibly fix this? How could anyone? The trust had been shattered, the walls had been broken down, and now I was standing in a room with the man who had been a part of it all. I don't know how I'm supposed to look at you anymore, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Greg. I don't know if I can ever look at Carol the same way either. Greg's expression softened for a moment, like he finally understood the depth of what he had done. Mike, you're my best friend. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to get this far. It was a mistake. A terrible, awful mistake. But it wasn't supposed to end like this. I couldn't do it. I couldn't stand there listening to his apologies anymore. The words were hollow. They meant nothing. The damage was already done, and nothing he said would change that. I walked to the door, my hand on the handle, but before I left, I turned to face him one last time. I'm done, Greg. Don't contact me again. Don't try to fix this. There's no fixing it. I need space. Greg didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking defeated, like he had already lost everything that mattered to him. And in a way, he had. Because I was walking out of his life for good. I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive him. And I didn't know if I ever would. When I left the building, I felt a strange emptiness settle inside me. The cold air hit me like a slap, but it didn't matter. I could feel it in every part of my body. The weight of the world had shifted, and I had no idea where I was supposed to go from here. I had to get back to Carol. I had to face her. But how could I? How could I look her in the eyes and pretend like everything was okay? How could I face the woman I had spent my entire life with, knowing what she had done, knowing what she had let happen? As I drove back home, I could feel the tension building. Every passing minute felt like an eternity. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, or if I was even ready to hear her explanation. The idea of walking back into that house, back into the life we had built, was terrifying. But it was the only thing I could do. I had to face it. I had to confront it. When I walked through the door, the house felt different. The air was still, like something was suspended, waiting to happen. I could hear her in the kitchen, humming softly, preparing something. It was like nothing had changed. But everything had. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. But then, as if on instinct, I walked toward the kitchen. Carol turned around when she heard my footsteps. Her smile faltered when she saw me. Mike, you're back. Her voice was hesitant, like she was waiting for me to say something, anything. I didn't say a word at first. I just stood there, watching her, trying to make sense of everything. She was standing there, in front of me, just like she always had been. But this time, I could feel the distance between us. This time, I didn't see my wife. I saw a stranger. And that's when I realized. I had no idea who she was anymore. Carol, we need to talk, I said, my voice low but steady. She swallowed, the color draining from her face. She knew what I was going to say. She had to know. And as the words came tumbling out of my mouth, I knew that everything was about to change forever. It was time for the truth. The truth we had both been avoiding for so long. But neither of us was ready for the way it would all unfold. Carol didn't flinch when I said the words, we need to talk. It was as if she had already prepared herself for this moment. I don't know if that made me feel better or worse. She just stood there, eyes fixed on the counter, her hands nervously wiping the kitchen towel over the edge of a plate, over and over again. The silence between us wasn't the comfortable silence I had grown accustomed to over the years. It wasn't the peaceful silence you get when you've been married for a long time and can share moments without saying a word. No, this was different. This was thick with tension, thick with everything unsaid, every lie that had been building up between us for months, maybe even longer. I could see her hands trembling. She wasn't hiding it. She was scared. And why wouldn't she be? The truth was out now. She could no longer hide behind the smiles and sweet words. She could no longer pretend everything was fine, pretend that our marriage was still what it used to be. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Every breath seemed louder than the last. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, but I couldn't make myself move. The words I needed to say, the questions I needed to ask, were stuck in my throat. How could I possibly begin to unravel this? Where did I even start? Finally, I spoke. How long, Carol? I saw her flinch at the question. It was the one thing I needed to know, the one thing that had been gnawing at me since the moment I first read the letter. How long had she been hiding this from me? How long had she been living this secret life, knowing that it would destroy me if I ever found out? Her voice was barely a whisper when she answered. It started, a year ago, after the conference. A year. That was the timeline. That was the moment everything changed. I stood there, trying to wrap my mind around it. A whole year. And it wasn't just some casual fling, some brief moment of weakness. It had lasted for an entire year. I could feel the anger rising inside me, bubbling up like a pot about to boil over. But I held it in. I had to. I needed to understand. I needed her to tell me everything, even if it was going to break me. You've been seeing him for a year, I repeated, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Greg? My best friend? The man I've trusted more than anyone else. She didn't look up at me. She just kept scrubbing at the plate, like the act of cleaning could somehow wipe away the mess she had made of everything. I never meant for it to happen, Mike. It just did. Just did. I echoed, my voice rising despite myself. How does something like this just happen? You don't just fall into bed with someone you're not supposed to be with, Carol. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a slip-up. This was betrayal. She looked up at me then, her eyes wide with shock, but I wasn't finished. A year, Carol. A year of lies. A year of you looking me in the eyes and pretending nothing was wrong. And Greg? Greg, he's the one you decided to betray me with? My best friend? Her face crumpled, the tears finally spilling over. She wiped them away angrily, as though she was trying to erase the shame. But it didn't work. Nothing would ever erase what had happened. It wasn't like that, Mike, she sobbed. I never wanted it to go this far. I didn't want to hurt you. But somewhere along the way, I got lost. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to make it stop. You could have told me, I said, my voice cold now. You could have stopped it before it got this far. You could have been honest with me. But instead, you chose to keep it all hidden. You chose to betray me. She looked at me then, her eyes filled with regret, filled with something else, something I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was shame. Or maybe it was the realization that she had destroyed everything we had. I didn't know how to fix it, she whispered. I didn't know how to fix me. I felt so empty, Mike. So alone. And when Greg came into my life, it was like something was filling that emptiness, even if it was just temporary. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could fix it without losing you. But I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to lose you. The words were pouring out of her now, but they weren't enough. None of them would ever be enough. They were just words. And words could never undo the damage that had been done. I could feel myself unraveling. The anger, the confusion, the sadness. It was all bubbling up inside me, a storm I couldn't control. I wanted to shout at her. I wanted to scream, to tell her how much she had hurt me, how much she had destroyed me. But I couldn't. Instead, I turned around, my back to her, and walked out of the kitchen. I needed space. I needed air. I needed to think. I needed to get out of that house before I did something I would regret. I heard Carol call out to me, her voice breaking. Mike, please. Please don't leave. We can work through this. I want to fix this. But I didn't answer. I couldn't. The only thing I could think about was how everything had changed. How the life I thought I knew had come crashing down around me. And I didn't even know who I was anymore. I grabbed my jacket, walked out the door, and slammed it behind me. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was doing. But all I knew was that I couldn't stay. Not with her. Not in that house. The truth had been laid bare. And there was no going back from it. As I stepped into the cold night air, the weight of the situation hit me like a freight train. I had to make a decision. A decision that would change everything. But was I ready to face the consequences of that decision? Would I ever be able to look at Carol the same way again? The answer wasn't clear yet. But I knew one thing for sure. My life had just been shattered, and it was never going to be the same. The streets were empty as I walked. The city had a way of feeling desolate when you were running from something, even if you didn't know exactly what you were running toward. My jacket was pulled tight against the cold wind, but the chill that had settled in my bones wasn't from the night air. It was from the realization that my entire life had just been thrown into question. I could still hear Carol's voice echoing in my mind, begging me to stay, to give her another chance. But how could I? How could I even begin to process the weight of what had just happened? I needed time. Time to think. Time to breathe. Time to let my mind catch up with the storm inside of me. The lies, the betrayal. They were suffocating me, and I wasn't sure how to escape them. I ended up at the park. It was dark, the streetlights casting long shadows across the empty paths. I sat down on one of the benches, my hands stuffed in my pockets, staring into the distance. The stillness of the night seemed to mock me, the quiet amplifying the chaos in my head. I tried to focus on something else, anything else. But no matter how hard I tried, my thoughts kept returning to them, Carol and Greg. The way they had smiled at each other. The way they had probably whispered secrets to each other while I was at work, oblivious to everything. How had I not seen it? How had I let myself become so blind to what was right in front of me? I could feel the anger rising again, a deep, seething heat that made my chest tight. I wanted to confront them both. I wanted to scream at them, to demand answers, to make them understand the weight of what they had done to me. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. The truth was already out. The damage had already been done. What could they possibly say now that would make it right? What could they say that would make me want to rebuild what we had? I hadn't talked to Greg since that moment in his office. I had turned away from him, knowing there was nothing left to say. But even so, I couldn't escape the image of him. He was my best friend. He was supposed to be someone I could count on, someone who knew me better than anyone else. And yet, here he was, the one who had shattered my world. I thought about calling him, maybe confronting him again, maybe trying to make sense of it, trying to find closure. But I knew that I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. The longer I sat there, the more the weight of everything hit me. I had been living a lie. And what hurt the most wasn't just the betrayal. It was the fact that I had given so much of myself, so much trust, to people who had used it against me. It was as if the life I had known, the life I had carefully built, brick by brick, had crumbled in a single moment. And now, all I had left were the pieces of a shattered foundation. How do you rebuild from that? How do you go on knowing that everything you thought was real was just an illusion? I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I stared at it for a long time, wondering if I should text Carol, wondering if I should let her know where I was, what I was feeling. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't let her back in, not yet. I needed space. I needed to breathe. I decided then that I needed to take control. I needed to make a decision that would set the course for the rest of my life. This wasn't just about Carol and Greg anymore. This was about me. It was about reclaiming what was mine, about finding a way to move forward. I stood up from the bench, the weight of the world still pressing down on me. But there was something else now, a small spark of determination. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was something else. But it was there, burning bright. I walked away from the park, my steps firm, my mind set. There were still a lot of questions, a lot of things I didn't have answers to. But one thing was clear. I couldn't stay in that house. I couldn't stay in that life. I needed to get away. I needed a fresh start. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't go back to the life I had just left behind. As I walked through the streets, a thought struck me. Maybe it wasn't just Carol and Greg who had betrayed me. Maybe I had betrayed myself, too. Maybe I had been so focused on the life I thought I was building that I had ignored the warning signs. Maybe I had been living in a dream. But now that dream had shattered, and all I had left was the cold, hard truth. And that truth was that I was no longer the man I used to be. I didn't know who I was anymore, but I was about to find out. The next steps weren't going to be easy, but I had to take them. And maybe, just maybe, I would find a way to move on, to rebuild, to forgive. But that was a long way off. For now, all I could do was keep walking. By the time I returned home, it was well past midnight. The streets were quiet, the world asleep, but my mind was racing at full speed. My thoughts were a whirlwind of questions, regret, and frustration. I had no idea what to do, where to go, or how to even start piecing everything back together. Carol had been waiting for me. I could feel it. I didn't know what I expected when I walked back in that door, but I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same. The house, once a sanctuary of familiarity, now felt like a prison. It wasn't just the emptiness of the space. It was the weight of everything that had been said and unsaid. I could almost hear her voice, calling my name, asking me to forgive her, asking me to give her a chance to explain. But what was there to explain? The truth was already out there. The betrayal had already been laid bare between us, and no amount of words could undo the damage. I found myself standing at the front door for a long time, keys in hand, just staring at the door handle, feeling the cold metal against my fingers. I was torn, unable to move forward, unable to go back. Everything in me wanted to walk away. But where would I go? What would I do? How could I possibly live with this, knowing that my wife, the woman I had trusted, the mother of my children, had betrayed me with someone I had called my best friend? I entered the house quietly, as though trying to avoid disturbing the silence that had taken over. The dim lights from the hallway gave the place an eerie glow, a stark contrast to the warmth I once felt here. Carol was sitting in the living room, her face pale, eyes swollen from crying. She had been waiting for me, but she didn't say anything at first. She just sat there, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, looking down, as if she was trying to summon the courage to speak. But I could see it in her eyes, the fear, the regret, the hopelessness. She knew. She knew that whatever came next, it was never going to be the same. I stood in the doorway for a moment, staring at her. I couldn't speak. I didn't have the words. The weight of everything was too much. All I could do was look at her, trying to piece together the woman I had married with the woman who had just confessed to the one thing I thought I'd never face. Finally, she spoke, her voice small and shaky. Mike, please, I'm so sorry. I know I've destroyed everything, but I need you to understand something. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear her apology. What could she possibly say that would make this better? What could she say that would take away the pain, the betrayal, the loss? Please, she whispered again. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. It's not about Greg. It never was. It was always about me. I was broken, Mike. And I didn't know how to fix it. And when Greg came into my life, he made me feel seen, made me feel like I wasn't invisible anymore. Her words pierced through me like a knife. She wasn't just apologizing for the affair. She was apologizing for something deeper. She was admitting that her feelings of inadequacy, of being invisible in our marriage, had driven her to seek solace in someone else. It wasn't about love, not really. It was about feeling wanted, about filling a void she hadn't known how to fill with me. But that doesn't excuse what I did, she continued, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. I know that. I've been so selfish, Mike. I've hurt you in ways I can never undo. The anger in me flared up again, but this time, it wasn't directed at her. It was directed at myself. I had been blind. I had been so caught up in the routine of our lives, so comfortable in the monotony, that I didn't see her slipping away. I didn't see the cracks forming in the foundation of our marriage. I had been so sure of everything, and now everything had collapsed in a way I couldn't even comprehend. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in what felt like forever. She wasn't the woman I married anymore. She was a stranger to me, someone who had made choices I could never have imagined, someone who had shattered everything I believed in. You've been lying to me for a year, Carol, I said, my voice flat. A year. And you think that one apology can fix it? She recoiled slightly, as though my words had physically struck her. She opened her mouth, but I held up my hand to stop her. I don't know how we can come back from this, I continued, the words feeling like they were clawing their way out of me. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way. And Greg, he was supposed to be my friend, Carol. How could he do this to me? How could you both do this to me? She started to speak again, but I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear to hear any more excuses, any more explanations. So I turned away. I needed space. I needed to breathe. I walked into the hallway, feeling like a stranger in my own home, a man in a place he no longer recognized. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. I was numb. Mike, please, Carol's voice cracked. Don't leave. Please, don't leave me. We can fix this. But I couldn't. I couldn't stay. I couldn't stay in that house, in that life. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, and I needed to get out. I don't know if I can forgive you, Carol, I said quietly, my voice barely audible. I don't know if I ever will. And with that, I walked out. The door closed behind me, and I didn't look back. I had no idea where I was going. All I knew was that I needed to leave. I needed to find a way to rebuild, to find myself again. But I didn't know how. And that terrified me more than anything else. The road ahead was uncertain, and I was standing at the crossroads. But I couldn't go back. I couldn't go back to a life built on lies. And whatever came next, I knew it would never be the same. The weeks that followed were nothing like I'd ever imagined they would be. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, my mind racing through everything that had happened. There were days when I didn't want to get out of bed, when the weight of the betrayal hung over me like a dark cloud. I couldn't ignore it, couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. It was real, and it had changed everything. But somewhere, in the middle of all the pain, I realized something important. I still had control. I still had the power to shape what came next, to choose how I would move forward. Yes, my life had been shattered, and no, I didn't know how to rebuild it yet. But one thing was for sure, I wasn't going to let the past define me. I took time to reflect, time to understand what had happened and what I needed. I spent a lot of time alone, but I also leaned on people I trusted. I reconnected with friends I hadn't spoken to in years, people who reminded me that I wasn't just Mike. I was someone with strength, someone who could rise above this. I took walks in the park, went to the gym, and started getting back into old hobbies I had let fall by the wayside. Slowly, piece by piece, I started to heal. The hardest part was letting go of the anger. I realized that holding on to it was only hurting me. It was eating me from the inside out. I had to forgive, not for Carol's sake, but for my own. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean I would ever forget what had happened. But it meant I was taking back my life. I wasn't going to let her mistakes control my future. One day, I reached out to Carol. I didn't know if it was the right time, but I knew I couldn't keep running away from the conversation we needed to have. We met at a cafe, a neutral place, somewhere that felt less like a battleground. When I saw her, I could tell she had been struggling too. Her face was tired, her eyes were worn from the sleepless nights, but there was something else there, a glimmer of hope. We didn't talk right away. We just sat there, drinking our coffee in silence, the weight of everything between us. And then, Carol spoke. "Mike, I know I've lost your trust, and I know that I may never get it back. But I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I want to be better. I want to fix myself for me. Not for you, not for anyone else, but for me. And if I could take back what I did, I would in a heartbeat. But I can't. All I can do is show you that I'm working on being a better person." I listened to her words. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again, but I knew that forgiveness didn't mean letting someone off the hook. It meant giving myself peace. "I don't know what the future holds for us, Carol," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "But I can't live in the past. And I don't want to. I need to move forward. And I need to find myself again." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. But this time, there was no guilt in her expression. It was just raw, honest emotion. We both knew that things could never go back to how they were. Our marriage had changed, and so had I. But that didn't mean I had to give up on myself, on my own happiness, or even on the possibility of moving forward. I left the cafe that day with a sense of clarity I hadn't had in months. The road ahead was uncertain, yes, but for the first time, I felt like I was finally on the right path. There were no guarantees, no promises that everything would be perfect, but I was ready to rebuild. I was ready to let go of the anger and the pain that had been weighing me down. In the end, it wasn't about fixing what had been broken. It was about learning from it, growing from it, and finding peace in the chaos. I didn't know what the future held, whether that would involve Carol or not. But I knew that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. And no matter where life took me, I was going to be okay. The road to healing had begun, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope. A quiet, steady hope that everything, in time, would be all right.